Welcome back to the Explanation Pro. Today I'll recap the newest action, thriller film called Interceptor. Spoilers incoming. In the event of a nuclear missile attack, it would only take U.S. forces 12 minutes to retaliate and destroy any incoming missile mid-flight. In total, there are 2 interceptor launch sites built for this purpose. Unfortunately, one of the sites, Alaska's Fort Greely, is attacked by unknown assailants presumably affiliated with a terrorist faction. The other warning station, SBX-1, is a small platform in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, 1,500 miles from Hawaii. On this particular day, a helicopter carrying decorated U.S. Army Captain J.J. Collins lands on the launch site. After being welcomed aboard by Ensign Washington, she meets with Lieutenant Colonel Clark Marshall in his office. The Colonel and J.J. discuss details of her reassignment to this location following the conclusion of a high-profile case. While she retires in a small cubicle, she flashes back to instances of sexual misconduct by one of her superiors. Later the Colonel calls in J.J. to respond to a distress signal after the hostile takeover of Fort Greely. She teams up with Beaver Baker and Corporal Rahul Shah in the station's command center as they monitor the live radar view of a Russian attack submarine. Just as Beaver dismisses it as a test of some kind, J.J. picks up an NSA broadcast that details an attack at Tavlinka ICBM station wherein 16 Topol-M nuclear warheads were seized. The Colonel immediately gets a phone call from the Pentagon to alert them of the increasingly alarming situation. The group views a video feed from one of the terrorists threatening to blow up the entire United States. J.J. now finds herself as part of the last line of defense. Southwest, she decides to place SBX-1 on emergency lockdown. Just as she walks out with the Colonel, she sees a small group of operatives posing as janitors in the station. They open fire, shooting Marshall in the head while J.J. tries to retaliate, giving Shah enough time to lock the doors in the command center. She shoots one of the oxygen tanks, triggering the smoke detector as she grabs the Colonel's badge and runs back to the command center. An intense struggle ensues, with the assailant taking her down, only to get stabbed in the eye with his gun. Unfortunately, she notices that the man's backpack is leaking sulfuric acid, so she acts quickly to remove her jacket, which had been sprayed with the acid moments earlier. Now only one door separates her from the terrorist group, as ex-military intelligence soldier Alexander Kessel watches her destroy the last keycard. After she takes command, a stunned Shah checks in on an unconscious Baker, who was grazed by a stray bullet. While they are holed up in the command center, Kessel tries to negotiate entry into the command center, by which his team can disarm the interceptor system and leave the continental U.S. open to nuclear attack from the 16 stolen warheads. J.J. rebuffs his threats, so infiltrators attempt to enter instead with blowtorches forcibly. He reveals that the infiltration began 6 years ago. As she continues talking with him, he reveals a nerve agent that had been spread through the air conditioning vents earlier, leaving the rest of the staff immobile enough for his team to shoot them dead. Suddenly, the station gets a call from the White House Situation Room, where she updates General Dyson on their current predicament, including the fact that the terrorists will successfully breach the command center in 30 minutes. While the general assigns a SEAL team to rescue them, President Wallace gives orders to hold out as long as possible until they recover all of the missing warheads. Shah becomes increasingly worried they will not last very long as he is inexperienced in combat. Kessel calls back on the intercom and threatens to kill Captain Welsh unless they open the doors. J.J. stands firm and lets the captain die. As the terrorists continue to destroy the door, she calms Shah down as they discuss possible entry points that the terrorist can exploit to come inside. Just as she suspects the hatch to the radar dome may be compromised, an operative launches a surprise attack after entering via a floor hatch. She manages to disarm him as she uses her combat experience to fight back at the martial artist. While Shah prepares the shotgun, she tries to keep him at bay by throwing a few things at him and slamming the fridge in front of him. As he throws a knife, she grabs the shotgun and kills him. They immediately drag his body to the open hatch, much to Kessel's dismay, who continues to peer from outside the door. Later, Shah looks through the camera feeds and confirms everyone in the rig has died. Kessel calls for J.J. to intimidate her with her lewd photos from the past. He divulges that after the sexual misconduct she endured during her service, she experienced hazing, bullying, and threats from her peers in the military as revenge. This was so hard to bear that she contemplated suicide by drowning in the bathtub, only to be saved by her father at the last minute. To soften her unbeatable stance, the devious operative offers $30 million to exile herself away from her duties, saying she deserves to walk away from her trauma. Though tempting, J.J. retains her stance. After some time, the terrorists have entirely torn the first door of the bridge. Just then, Beaver regains consciousness, shooting JJ and Shaw while letting Kessel and his men inside the command center. He ties them to a chair and reveals himself as an inside man for the infiltrators, motivated by a big payday and xenophobia. As he looks forward to sexually assaulting JJ when their mission is over, she retaliates by headbutting him before Kessel intervenes. While hijacking a live feed through the emergency broadcasting signal, the infiltrators appear in front of General Dyson and the president to disclose their plan. Across all channels in every U.S. state, he streams his manifesto about the failures in the history of the United States online. He then instructs Tavlinka Station to launch the nukes immediately while naming the 16 American cities to be destroyed, the last being Washington, D.C. He also mocks Shaw for his Hindu faith as Beaver punches him. Finding an opportune moment to dislocate her thumbs, JJ breaks free of her restraints and locks Kessel, Beaver, and another henchman back out of the command center. Unfortunately, an operative, Kira, remains the lone enemy in the room, and she is forced to go toe-to-toe with her while aiming to start the intercept of the missile. A tense brawl ensues as JJ does her best to reach the control unit while keeping her at bay with flips and kicks. She finds the Golden Deer trophy and stabs the operative in the neck before poisoning her with Filofoam. She proceeds to press the launch button, intercepting the nuke before it reaches its target. Almost immediately, Kira uses all her strength left to shoot JJ, only to be shot in the head, which makes her fall down the open hatch. She flips off Kessler, who had witnessed the whole fight by the door of the command center. With no way back inside, Beaver starts arguing with Kessel, worried that she will ultimately cease everything they worked hard for. Meanwhile, JJ tries to nurse her bullet wounds with a scalpel and duct tape. She takes another call from the White House Situation Room, where everyone, including the president, is astonished by her survival so far. General Dyson discloses information about Kessel, who works as a spy op and torture specialist for the Russians. Shaw later wakes up from unconsciousness as she cuts off his bounds. She dozes off for a while and recalls a time when her father comforted her after a suicide attempt, wishing her to be strong like her mother. She wakes up as Kessel tries to negotiate with her while talking about his reasons for turning back on the U.S. government. To force her surrender, he shows a live video from the Patriots Valley retirement home in Scottsdale, where his men torture her father. After speaking with her father, who is defiantly shouting for her to keep fighting, Kessel orders the men to kill him as the transmission is cut. JJ becomes inconsolable as she tries to understand how Kessel found her father. The desperate operative turns to Plan B, initiating the station's scuttling protocol, hoping to sink the station if he cannot take control of it. General Dyson immediately calls in to inform her that the protocol has been activated. The two officers are now forced to think of a solution as the station will sink entirely in 13 minutes. Though JJ initially volunteers to re-engage the station's hatches manually, Shaw stops her, risking drowning as he drops through the floor hatch to the ocean below to save the station. Beaver then goes down to the station to follow Shaw and kill him. Meanwhile, as SEAL teams are 20 minutes from the location, JJ guides Shaw in slowing the station from sinking so that the interceptors can still launch and destroy the warheads when they eventually pass through the airspace overhead. He succeeds in closing all the necessary valves but bids the captain goodbye as Beaver climbs down the ladder to shoot him in the head. He then picks up the comms unit and taunts JJ, which angers her more. Now alone, she rethinks a new strategy to save herself and the station. She suddenly recalls Kessel's financial dealing with someone over the phone, speaking the code, ZSR 1996, for a Zurich Schweiz bank account. She writes it down and shows it to him, threatening to expose that he is a paid criminal rather than an extremist. After being exposed, he cuts down the live feeds but demands entry inside the command center. As she updates the White House, she decides to make a risky gamble, hiding in the command center and making Kessel, Beaver, and the remaining henchmen believe that they will take over and disable a seemingly empty center. With only 12 minutes left, the White House analyst downplays her success rate for this, but she fires back at him for being insensitive to her situation. After a vouch of confidence from her superiors, she executes her trap. Kessel radios Beaver to check up on the station's roof to find and eliminate her, thinking she has escaped. The terrorists enter the room as Kessel orders all warheads to be launched simultaneously before destroying the area with acid. Beaver later confirms that JJ did not climb up, which forces the operative to search the room. Fortunately, as JJ hides inside a hazmat suit, she manages to dispatch the remaining henchmen while Kessel flees the room stealthily. With only 7 minutes left to take out all missiles, she grabs a laptop, ascends to the roof, and plugs the device in, hoping to launch the interceptor missiles using this method manually. However, she is found by Beaver holding a gun to her head. The two officers engage in hand-to-hand combat, with JJ emerging victorious after using razor wire to decapitate the traitorous Beaver. Unfortunately, she falls off the rig and plunges into the ocean. Remembering her father's words, she swims back up, leaving her bulletproof vest behind. Finding a ladder, she climbs up and tries to cross the underside of the station through the metal piping. Though injuring her left arm, she manages to swing across back to the open hatch. With only 1 minute to go, the White House and the world watches with bated breath for her to reach the enter key atop the roof, which she does, luckily. Everyone starts rejoicing from around the world as the system confirms all missiles were destroyed. Meanwhile, Kessel, who had called in a Russian submarine to pick up the team of operatives earlier, finds her just after the successful launch. Since his plan failed, he engages in combat with her and ends up with a broken leg, almost subduing him until the Russian submarine ascends from the sea. A Russian captain and his colleague emerge from the submarine tower, but rather than shooting JJ, they fire at Kessel instead, killing him instantly with a bullet to his chest. The Russian captain salutes her before departing. JJ later recovers from her ordeal in the hospital, and she is personally given a promotion as part of the national security staff by U.S. President Wallace for her efforts. She later receives a visit from her injured father, who had been rescued by friends witnessing his plight on the live broadcast. As the president leaves, he comforts her over her grief for Shaw's death and presents Shaw's pet turtle, Turbo, who survived the wreckage of SBX-1. Surrounded by well wishes, flowers, and gifts, she happily talks about good times while putting recent events behind her. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and also subscribe my channel for more videos like this. See you in the next video.